adjustment, and individuality. The nucleus of the biphasic approach is the maintenance of the division of work and pleasure, subjecting the latter to the former's rule. However, the biphasic compulsion seems to expand over many other areas analogous to bureaucratic setups that have, as was pointed out by Max Weber, an inherent tendency to expand. This pertains particularly to the problem of adjustment to which the handling of pleasure by the column leads. While the relation between the individual and his environment is in continuous interaction with the conflict between pleasure and duty, the antagonism between the individual and the universal cannot be altogether reduced to instinctual dynamics, but pertains also to the objective sociological dimension. The biphasic is applied to this dimension as well as to psychology in a typical pattern of advice. At times, the readers are encouraged to be strong, rugged individuals, at other times to adjust themselves, not to be stubborn, but rather to comply with requirements from outside. The classical liberal ideas of unlimited individual activity, freedom, and ruggedness are incompatible with the present developmental phase in which the individual is more and more required to obey strict organizational demands made by society. The same person can hardly be expected to be thoroughly adjusted and strongly individualistic at the same time. Yet the individualistic ideology is maintained the more strongly, the less adequately it becomes to actual conditions. The conflicts thus induced must be taken care of by the column. It takes the individual apart, as it were, into adaptive and autonomous components, thus implicitly endorsing the actual impossibility of the much praised integration. However, in order to get the right perspective, the underlying contradiction should not be oversimplified. In fact, the two requirements not only contradict each other, but are continuously intertwined. Thus, even today, success is contingent upon individual qualities which, though utterly different from the old ones, are by no means unequivocally defined by the oft-stressed ego weakness, only but require, at the same time, considerable strength, namely the capacity of sacrificing oneself, as it were, for the sake of maintaining oneself. Adjustment calls for individuality. Conversely, individual qualities themselves are a priori measured today in terms of potential success. Thus, it is taken for granted that an original idea is something that will sell and prove itself on the market. In fact, the psychological situation is rather paradoxical. He who wants to adjust himself to a competitive pattern of society or to its more hierarchical successor has to pursue his own particularistic individual interests, rather ruthlessly, in order to find recognition. He has, so to speak, to adjust through non-adjustment, through unwavering emphasis on his limited self-interest and their concomitant psychological limitations. Conversely, the development of spontaneous individuality implies by necessity some degree of adjustment. Henri Bergson has pointed out in his Laughter that the psychological calcifications which make an individual comical in an aesthetic sense indicate some failure in his maturity and are bound up with his incapacity to cope with changing social situations, going as far as stating that, in a way, the concept of character denoted a rigidified personality pattern impervious to life experience is comical per se. Thus, the emphasis on individuality in abstracto, its severance from contacts with the outside world, results in a way in its maladjustment. It induces compulsive behavior, which we are tempted usually to attribute only to the opposite, to the pressure of an alienated and conventionalized reality. It is therefore dangerous, though easily understandable, in a social setup in which a fetish is made of the concept of adjustment to isolate the concepts of individuality and adjustment, and to play up undialectically one against the other. It is this complex structure which provides the column with the opportunity to somehow find a common denominator for the contradictory requirements of being a personality and being, as it is called euphemistically, cooperative. The fact that one of the contradictory requirements often fulfills the other unwittingly is skillfully exploited. The encouragement of direct adjustment to outside forces often takes the form of glorifying, to use once again the terminology of popular psychology, the extrovert at the expense of the introvert. It often seems that the column really does not expect an integration of social norms with the personality, but rather wants the addressees to obey requirements from outside to the extent to which it has to be done, while at the same time being led to ruthlessly falling back on a kind of anarchic ruggedness as soon as they can get away with it. The configuration of rigid obedience and lack of true introjection of norms being itself a symptom of something wrong underneath. People are continuously reminded that they should not brood, but should seize their opportunity when it is time to act, that they should be pleasant to others, avoid quarreling, and be sensible. Quote, be very considerate at home where tension mounts if you display nervousness. November 19, 1952, Taurus. Control desire to let fly with choice sarcastic comments. November 21st, 1952, Capricorn. Replace mulling over troubles by new interests. December 9th, 1952, Pisces. Temptation to bawl out coworkers should be sternly repressed. December 9th, 1952, Cancer. Be considerate of others, work all questions out in cooperative fashion. December 13th, 1952, Scorpio. AM brings many problems into open to test your self-control. November 30th, 1952, Aries. You really are explosive during morning without any apparent reason. It's just the planets testing your self-control. Keep calm. December 31st, 1952, Cancer. Be more social. November 12th, 1952, Virgo. Get out of yourself. Make every new association possible. November 13th, 1952, Aquarius. Much pleasure is yours by keeping around happy, cheerful personalities. December 14th, 1952, Cancer. Much happiness is easily yours now if you accept invitations. January 12th, 1953, Leo. Attach yourself to all about you who are vital, dynamic, and able to advance you quickly. January 13th, 1953, Virgo. Get out in the world, meet all those who can show you more modern ways. January 20th, 1953, Scorpio. You are eager to get those plans into execution. Fine, lose no time, contact all friends able to help, expand into new outlets in all directions. January 3rd, 1953, Sagittarius. Contact all possible and forcefully state your own desired aims. In a charming manner, discuss the future with practical friends. Act. January 9th, 1953, Pisces. Action. January 18th, 1953, Scorpio. End quote. Most of these devices express an awareness of some difficulties on the part of the addressee. Thus precisely the kind of compulsive and isolated elderly women who must provide a good part of the astrological audience are often afraid of any new contact, if not of any contacts at all. The column somehow comes to their aid. Psychotic characters, quote-unquote, in spite of their over-realistic defenses and success in isolating their delusions, are still continuously threatened by the loss of any relationship to reality, and it is one of the aims of the column inasmuch as it tries to help, to maintain this relationship on a superficial level. Similar experiences stand behind other advices of the same direction. Being pleasant refers to the petty quarrels particularly characteristic of crankish women from the lower middle classes, not brooding to the psychological habit of ruminating to be found in obsessive-compulsive persons. While the column strengthens their neurotic attitudes in certain directions, it tries to channelize them or isolate them from everyday functioning directions. From everyday functioning to remove overt symptoms which might hinder the reader's efficiency.